Thank you very much. Your background, very impressive. You worked, you're a clerk for two judges, Justice Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court, and Justice Wilkinson on the Fourth Court, who I know very well, Fourth Circuit. You served as counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Who'd you work for?
I worked for then Chairman Hatch.
Okay. And you served as Associate Counsel and Special Assistant President George W. Bush. What'd you do there?
Well, in the White House counsel's office, I oversaw a number of important legal issues in different agencies. I worked on judicial nominations and a variety of other issues.
What did you learn from your time as being a staff member of the Judiciary Committee?
I learned a great deal. I'm very, very pleased that I had the opportunity to spend about a year in Congress with this committee. I learned much more about the legislative process, how things work. I learned about how Congress takes seriously its obligation to make sure that statutes are constitutional. That was part of the role that I played there. And so I just learned about the whole legislative process and rulemaking and lawmaking here in Congress.
So you went to college at Yale, is that correct?
That's correct.
So tell us about some of the writings that you engaged in while you're at Yale. I think you know what I'm talking about. So tell me what you were thinking then and what do you think now?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Graham. When I was in college, it was a time of exploration. I spent a lot of my time at Yale studying political philosophy and reading social commentary. And perhaps like many of my colleagues and classmates at Yale, I enjoyed commenting on some of the narrow events that were happening at Yale. We were very focused on campus events. To be honest, looking back at some of those writings and rereading them, I cringe at some of the language that I used. And, I was young. It's over 2 decades ago now. But, I think I was responding to things that were happening on campus at that time. And in the intervening 2 decades, I like to think that I have matured as a thinker and writer and indeed as a person.
Well, specifically about the situation with the intoxication and sexual assault, can you explain to us sort of what you were thinking then and where you're at now?
Yeah.
Yes, Chairman Graham. So in some of my writings, I talked about the issue of rape and sexual assault, and I emphasized that rape and sexual assault are crimes for which men should be held accountable, and that no one should blame a victim of sexual assault or rape. I also attempted to make the common sense observation that there were some actions a woman could take to make it less likely to be a victim of those horrible crimes. And so that's what I was expressing in some of those pieces.
2013, you wrote a piece titled "The Trouble with Dignity and Rights of Recognition" about the DOMA debate. Could you tell us what your thinking was then?
Yes, that was about the Supreme Court's decision in Windsor, and one of the things I was writing about there was different conceptions of dignity. I've done scholarship on competing conceptions of dignity in constitutional law, both within the U.S. Supreme Court and in constitutional courts from other countries, and the Windsor case raised some particularly interesting questions about the use of the word dignity.
Well, you'll be going on. Have you ever been a judge before?
I have not.
So if approved by the Senate, you'll be on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. What can you tell us about your ability to do that job, never having been a judge before?
Thank you, Chairman Graham. I think the experience that I've had over the past 20 or so years fits very well with the specialized docket of the D.C. Circuit, which, as was mentioned, hears a disproportionate number of cases about administrative law and challenges to agency action. I have extensive practical experience with those issues, currently as the administrator of OIRA, where I oversee regulatory policy in the executive branch, and as counsel for this committee, working in the White House counsel's office. I also have a lot of scholarly experience with the types of issues that arise, as I've spent over a decade studying constitutional law, administrative law, separation of powers, and the like. So I believe my practical and scholarly experience fits well with the responsibilities of that court.
And finally, you were chosen for your current position by President Trump to implement his agenda of trying to deregulate the country. Is that correct?
Yes, I was chosen to help implement the president's regulatory reform agenda, which is a very ambitious one, and I have sought to do that in my current position responsibly in a manner that's consistent with law and in ways that are transparent and promote the norms of due process and fair notice.
Thank you very much. Senator Feinstein.